Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolon Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolon is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
We were the good guys, and everyone outside the church was evil and going to hell, and we had the only message that would bring the world any hope. We had to go and warn people. These terrible things are happening, and if you want this pain to stop, then you have to change, because God isn't going to change. After the September 11 attacks, we had the sign that said, "Thank God for September 11." What were we thinking? This massive crowd comes down. We were at this corner of this intersection of these 3 streets. By the time they actually reached us, we're just enraged. There was no space between us and them. It got really dicey. One of my cousins gave his signs to somebody else and started standing on top of a trash can, pretending like he wasn't with us. They were, again, incredibly intense because obviously the circumstances are so sobering. It brings me incredible sadness to think about now. I can't do this forever. My family, they would refuse to have any contact with me at all once I left. Somebody that we had confided in sent a letter to my parents and told them that we were planning to leave. And then that email came in and we left.
Alice, as you know, James Renner is one of my favorite true crime authors, and he has a new book out, Little Crazy Children. For readers of Ann Rule and Greg Olson, it is a riveting new true crime book from the acclaimed author of True Crime Addict and the creator-host of the podcast True Crime This Week and the Philosophy of Crime. James explores the unsolved murder of 16-year-old Lisa Pruitt in the real-life town of the best-selling novel Little Fires Everywhere for a painstakingly researched account of a senseless and heartbreaking tragedy and the people who were pulled into its aftermath. In September of 1990, in the Cleveland suburb of Shaker Heights, 16-year-old Lisa Pruitt, a poetry lover and member of a church youth group, was on her way to a midnight tryst with her boyfriend when she was viciously stabbed to death, only 30 feet from the boy's home.
The murder cast a palpable gloom over the upscale community and sparked accusations, theories, and rumors among Lisa's friends and peers. Together, they wove a damning narrative that circled back to a likely suspect, weird high school outcast Kevin Young. Without a shred of evidence, the teen was arrested, charged, and tried for the crime. His eventual acquittal didn't squelch the anger and outrage among those who believed that Kevin got away with murder. With a fresh perspective and painstaking research culled from police files, court records, transcripts, uncollected evidence, and new interviews, James Renner reconstructs the events leading up to and following that heartbreaking night. What emerges is a portrait of a community seething with dark undercurrents. Its single-minded authorities, protective, status-conscious parents, and the deeply peer-pressured teens within Lisa's circle. Who had the capacity for such unchecked violence? What monsters still lurk in the dark? After more than 30 years, questions like these continue to fester among the community of Shaker Heights, Ohio, still deeply scarred by wounds that remain hidden, unspoken, and unhealed.
So make sure you pick up Little Crazy Children at your favorite bookseller. I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, we do our best to figure out exactly what happened on the day Hae Min Lee was murdered. everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my eloquent co-host, Alice.
Hey, Brett. Thanks for saying that.
Oh, you've been
Anything
great,
but
Alice.
These days, you guys are going to get like the best bloopers during my newborn baby phase because synapses are not firing, let me tell you.
Yeah, we recorded an episode a couple days ago that was gold. Alice was right on. She was on top of it. She was killing it every minute.
Oh, it was not. But you know what? I am here, and the light's fixed.
The light is fixed.
If you heard
That's
other
great.
bloopers. The light is fixed. I have light in my closet now. I'm still in my closet. There is not a weirdo standing behind me, Brett. It's just blurred because, you know, it's kind of weird for people to see.
There will
my clothes.
always be my room. You know, my sound's pretty good for like kind of an open room. I've got all these sound reducing panels in front of me that help a little bit. But anyway, I'm sure people are really interested in the construction of our room and what it looks like. We're back to talk about Adnan, Syed, and the murder of Hae Min Lee. This is our third episode we've done in this case. Our third episode that we've recorded live with our patrons who are here watching. So thank you so much to all of them who've joined. This is a really interesting case. I'm sure you're already fascinated by it like we are. Today we've reached January 13th, 1999, which is the day that Hae Min Lee disappeared and was murdered. This is another one where we'll see how far we get today. If we don't finish, we'll release another episode tomorrow so that you guys don't have to wait to finish this. Obviously, this is an important date. Now, one thing I would like to do, if you don't mind, Alice, those of you who listened to our last episode, you might have noticed that by the end, we were a little tired and maybe we weren't as on target.
Sharp.
That's a good word. Sharp as we could have been. So there are just a couple things I want to go back to talk about how that episode ended up. The first two episodes in this series, we did the whole timeline. We did background on this case. We talked about some of the players, and we've come all the way up to the day before Hae Min Lee died. And I think there's a few things that are worth highlighting. The first is, in that year in 1998, Adnan Syed and Hae Min Lee had had a very serious relationship. It was a relationship that lasted 10, 11 months. It was passionate and intense. If you've seen or heard any of Hae Min Lee's diary entries, you know that. I mean, she was very much into Adnan, really until she wasn't. And then she kind of quickly transitions to a new guy in her life, not unusual for a girl in high school. And she goes from this very passionate love for Adnan, and you really see it happen in her diary entries where she's really conflicted about how she feels about this new guy who's come into her life. That relationship, like a lot of young relationships, you know, they broke up 3 times by my count. 3 times they broke up. Hae broke up with Adnan each of those times. The first 2 times, even though they were rough, particularly the second time, where we talked a lot about that and the letter that she wrote to him and some of the stuff he said to others, they would get back together. And this third time that they broke up in December, I think probably people watching from the outside, maybe Adnan, maybe even Hae, I don't know, might have thought this is going to be another temporary breakup. And you see that in some of the stuff we talked about in the last episode. For Christmas, they're getting each other Christmas presents. Hae's buying him an expensive jacket. He's getting her a picture frame with a picture of them in it. When Hae's car gets into an accident, when she gets into an accident in her car, Adnan's one of the people she calls. Adnan's giving her a ride when her car's not working. When Adnan has problems with his car, she's giving him a ride. And I feel like probably right up until January 1st, there was a feeling that, you know, eventually they're probably going to get back together. And then you have January 1st. She goes on this first date with Dawn, and very quickly she is falling head over heels with Dawn, to the extent that 7 days later, she is doing one of the most significant things a teenager in 1999 could do, and that is updating her AOL Instant Messenger account. And we have talked about AIM before, and you know, I think a lot of you guys who are listening are actually our age. We always act like we're so old, but I think most of you kind of are our age. And you know, Alice, I mean, I don't know, you're a little younger than me, but I got to think it was just as important for you.
Absolutely. I was always on AIM. AOL was like your definition of who you were to the outside world. And I think that's a really great point, because if they're exchanging presents at Christmas and then January 1st is that first date, essentially they're still in a mode of like, we're still so close, we might get back together, to just 1 week later, she is falling over the cliff for somebody else. And while she feels very real emotions for someone else very quickly, you can imagine that Adnan is still kind of stuck in the 1 week earlier, 7 days earlier, where they're still exchanging very couple-like sorts of presents and, each other's emergency contact, and that he's getting whiplash as to, wait a second, I thought we were still in the same phase. And it's almost like he's still riding this motion, when you're in the car and suddenly the brakes are hit and you kind of get whiplash going forward. I feel like that's what that date is. It came out of nowhere, probably for him, because he doesn't care about Don or anybody else. This has happened many times before and it's never prevented them from getting back together. But now the change is with Hae Min Lee. And for it to go so public, while he's probably still on that train of, no, we're still very close. And even if he's not saying it out loud, it's probably deep down the feeling. And to see it so public was probably akin to getting hit by a car emotionally for him.
And this is January 9th. It's 8 days after that initial date with Dawn. It's 4 days before Hae will be murdered. And it's so hard to figure out what actually happened in this case and what didn't happen. But it seems pretty clear that Adnan at times has claimed he did not know that Hae had another boyfriend. That is not true. If he said that, he lied. Because there's no way that Hae updated her AIM instant messenger to include things like, I love you and I miss you, Donnie, and how she was a full-time girlfriend and her interests were music and most importantly, Dawn. There's no way she would do that and he not know about it. And in fact, there were people who testified that he was well aware that she was dating Dawn. So whatever we can say about this case and whatever Adnan may or may not have said, he absolutely knew she was dating Dawn. Now, maybe he didn't care. He'd met a girl in January too, and maybe he'd moved on. But what we know for certain is he would have known at that time that she had started dating this guy. So that sort of leads us up to January 13th. The last thing we talked about in January 12th were two things. Number one, Hae's final diary entry, which says, and I'll just reread it, I love you, Dawn. I think I have found my soulmate. I love you so much. I fell in love with you the moment I opened my eyes to see you in the break room for the first time. That is her final diary entry. At 11:27, Adnan calls her on January the 12th. He doesn't get her. At 12:01 a.m., he calls her again. This call lasts 2 seconds. He also doesn't get her then. At 12:35, he calls her again. This call lasts 1 minute and 24 seconds. One thing that's interesting about these calls, it's often said that they had this thing where Adnan would not call her at her house and she would not call him at his house to prevent family members from knowing about their relationship. And that's certainly true of her. It would have been a big deal for her to call his house. It's always a little unclear exactly how much of a big deal it would be for him to call her. It's sometimes presented as they were equals in this relationship. They both had something to fear about their family finding out about them. That's not really true with her. Her family knew about Adnan. They didn't necessarily approve of the relationship, but they didn't know about it.
And you can also see that even if there were tension, I mean, it's Adnan's parents who show up at the school dance and take that public step of essentially shaming the two of them. We haven't heard of any similar, reaction by her parents. So in kind of the facts that we know already, if they were both facing tension, at least Adnan's parents were willing to essentially bring the embarrassment publicly.
And one thing Adnan will later tell his defense team is that the big problem was her parents wanted to meet his parents, and that just wasn't possible. And her mom just did not understand why she could not meet the parents of the boy that her daughter was dating. There's obvious reasons for that. Either way, Adnan's calling her 3 times around midnight, and that seems a little unusual. It's not really something he's supposed to be doing. It's not a problem because, unbeknownst to him, Hae is actually on the other line with Dawn while he's trying to call her. So he calls her, minute 24 seconds. He says that the point of this call was to give her his new cell phone number. He just got his cell phone activated that day. And so he's called a couple people to give him his cell phone number. He calls Hae. She actually writes his number in her diary on a page, which is otherwise covered with Dawn's name written like 100 times. So there's Adnan's number up at the top, and then there's Dawn, just written over and over again. So one thing that's interesting about this call, obviously the only thing we know about it is what Adnan says about it. He will later tell a mutual friend, a girl named Becky Walker, who testifies at trial, that Hae actually called him that night and that she wanted to get back together with him. And Adnan told Hae it wasn't going to work out, their relationship was fine the way it was, but that they would always be close. And in fact, Adnan would also say to Becky, shortly before Hae's body was found, that he was kind of worried that something he might have said that night could have been what made Hae leave or go away. Of course, her body was found and she didn't go anywhere. This is a strange statement. It obviously isn't true. Number one, Hae didn't call him. He called Hae. Number two, Hae is literally on the phone with Don during this conversation, which only lasts a little bit over a minute. And after the call ends, in her diary, she's not writing, "Oh, woe is me, I asked Adnan if we'd ever get back together." And she's writing about how much she loves Don. I don't know why Adnan told Becky this, but it's not true. This is not the conversation they had. So, sort of a strange thing that happened that night before the next day, well, that day, when Hae would disappear. One thing to note about the weather, there was a big ice storm coming. So the DMV, which is the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, an ice storm was going to hit it the next day. A third of customers lose power that day. Some of them don't get it back for 2 weeks. On January the 13th, it's 58 degrees. By the 14th, by the day after that, it's a high of 35 and a low of 21. So this is coming. Everybody kind of knows it's coming. This is going to have some sort of interesting effects as we look forward on how this day went. So that sort of ends that night. Sun comes up the next morning at 7:22 a.m. Alonzo Sellers will clock into work at Coppin State College.
So that morning, 7:40 a.m., Adnan arrives at school. He's on time, which for him is actually unusual. His first class is photography that day. Krista Lynn Myers walks to class with Adnan, and Adnan tells her that he doesn't have his car that day because it's either in the shop or with his brother, who worked at a tire store. He told Krista that Hae was going to give him a ride to the store, and they run into Hae, and Krista hears Adnan ask Hae if she can give him a ride, and she says that she will. Krista would testify to this at trial, and Krista claims to be the one who informed Adnan that Hae was missing. She also claims to be the one who informed Adnan that her body had been found. And this is all really interesting because despite kind of this public AOL declaration of love for Don, at least in public here on this day, on this morning, Adnan is still speaking to Hae and treating Hae like his emergency contact, right? She's still the one he asked for a ride. He probably has other friends who could give him a ride, but he is still, at least in public and directed towards Hae, acting as if they were still back 2 weeks ago at like Christmas when they were exchanging gifts. To Hae's credit, she's saying yes, even though we know based on her diary, her mind and her heart are completely elsewhere.
And this is a really important statement that Adnan supposedly makes, and it's really important testimony in the trial because a couple things are happening here. Number one, Adnan is saying that his car, there's a problem with it. It's in the shop. It doesn't work. Well, we're soon going to find out that's not going to be true. He's going to lend it to Jay Wilds. It also is an opportunity for Adnan to get into Hae's car. Obviously, Hae's going to disappear and her car's going to disappear. So if you believe that Adnan did this, if you think Krista's remembering this correctly and telling the truth, it's pretty significant. One thing to note, Hae would often give Adnan a ride. So, like with most things, it's possible that this happened on a different day and that Krista's misremembering. However, there's going to be additional things we're going to hear later on that make you think that whatever happened in this case, Adnan did ask Hae for a ride that day.
And in another part of town, at 9:02 a.m., Don Clindist, clocks in at the Lens Crafters. He's working at the Hunt Valley Lens Crafters that day, a different one than the store he normally worked at with Hae, which was the Owings Mill location. Now, he does this on occasion as staffing needs require it. At 9:15, Adnan gives Stephanie a stuffed reindeer for her birthday. Remember, Stephanie's birthday, Adnan and Stephanie are very close, and so he gives her this stuffed reindeer. At 10:30 a.m., Krista leaves school for her job that she worked in the afternoons. Occasionally, it's said that Krista heard a later conversation in which Adnan and Hae discussed the ride, and Hae said she couldn't take Adnan because she had something else to do. If Hae and Adnan had this conversation, Krista did not overhear it because she had left school already by 10:30 a.m. to do her job, and this conversation would have taken place after the time she would have left school. So if she remembers that, it would have been a different day.
And this is a conversation that one of the other friends will recall, and I think will even testify to. And it's sometimes said that, as Krista has said, there's no way she could have heard that because she wouldn't have been there at the time. And just trying to keep it straight as much as we can about what people heard and when they heard it. Now we're going to start with cell phones. The cell phone data is important and controversial in this case. We are going to walk you through what the cell phone data says. At a later date, in a later episode, we're going to go through whether the cell phone data is accurate, whether it can be trusted, whether it can be doubted, all that stuff. What we're telling you today is just what it says. This is just what it says. And it may end up being that you can't really trust it, but this is literally what the cell phone data says. And the way this works, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but essentially when you use a cell phone, it pings off a tower, and that tower basically has a circle of coverage, and that circle of coverage is broken into 3 quadrants. I guess they're not quadrants, tridents, whatever. So an A, a B.
Now I just want gum.
An A, a B, and a C. And when you call, it's falling into one of those sectors. We'll do sectors. I think that's actually what they're called, is sectors. And so these sectors are listed on the data that the police will eventually get. If you look online, there's a lot of people who've done some really interesting things with sort of plopping these down on maps of the area so you can look at it. There's a site called The View from LL2, I think, which one of the ladies from Undisclosed, that was her blog before she did the Undisclosed podcast, did a pretty good job laying all this out. I went through the cell phone records in the case file and compared them to what she had done on the map, and it all seemed accurate to me. If anything we say, it strikes you as wrong or you think we're getting it wrong, please write in, let us know. We're happy to correct that later on, but that's how we're going to describe this cell phone data. And as I said, we're not getting into is it reliable or is it not. We're just going to give you what it says. We're going to talk about reliability later. So with that said, the first cell phone call, 10:45 a.m., Adnan calls Jay. Another thing to know about this area, and if you've ever seen a map of this, or if I had some friends who, when Serial came out, were really into this, and they drove around the whole area, and they drove to all these places, and they were really surprised at how close everything is. Everything is pretty close by. Woodlawn's pretty close to the Best Buy. It's pretty close to the park and ride that's going to come up. It's pretty close to Leakin Park, where her body's going to be found. All this stuff is pretty close. So we're going to be talking about areas that are relatively close to each other. So Adnan calls Jay. This is at 10:45 a.m. The call lasts for 1 minute and 24 seconds. When he does this, his cell phone is pinging the Woodlawn High School tower, as one would expect, and the sector in which Woodlawn High School sits. According to Adnan, this is the call that he's making to check to see whether Jay has purchased a present for Stephanie. Remember, Adnan got her a present. He's given her the stuffed reindeer. Stephanie and Adnan are best friends, as we said before. This is confirmed by several people, and Adnan says, I was just looking out for my best friend. I knew she would be upset if her boyfriend did not get her a present. Well, it turns out, to the shock of no one, that Jay apparently had not gotten her a present, at least according to Adnan. So at around 11 a.m., Adnan will actually pick up Jay and take him to the mall to purchase a present. Jay will then drive Adnan back to school. Adnan asks him to do him a favor and pick him up later. Now, Adnan will say it was pick me up after track practice and take me home. Jay will say, he tells him he's going to kill Hae and he needs him to pick him up. This is his first statement. This is when Adnan tells Jay, I'm going to kill Hae during this period. According to Jay's later statement, he'll say that Adnan actually told him that the day before when he called him. And he did call Jay the day before. Whatever the case, and what is undisputed, and this was one of those things that for a little while in my mind, I was trying to figure out whether or not Jay and Adnan were together and whether or not Adnan actually let Jay borrow his car and a cell phone. He absolutely did. That's just not even in question. It is undisputed Adnan leaves his cell phone and his car with Jay, who doesn't have either, doesn't have a cell phone or call, and tells him that Adnan will call Jay when he needs him to pick him up. Now, it's also lunchtime, around 11 o'clock. Becky will testify that Adnan was not there. Hae was daydreaming, and when she was asked, what are you thinking about? She was like, oh, I'm thinking about Dawn, right? So she's thinking about Dawn, and it's also possible, and this is a little confusing, and Becky's a little confused on this too, that she may have learned at lunch that Hae was giving Adnan a ride later in the day. At 12 o'clock, Alonzo Sellers will take his lunch break. He will clock back in at 12:30.
At 12:07, Adnan's cell phone calls Jennifer Pusateri, and this call lasts just 21 seconds. And when he makes this call, it pings at a tower further west from Woodlawn in an area that there's no reason to think that Jay would go. It's likely this is an example of a cell phone routing to a different tower than the preferred tower due to technological limitations. We'll go into this in more detail later, but basically, you're going to usually ping to the closest tower, but if that tower is overworked, it's accepting too many signals, then automatically another cell phone tower will pick up your ping to kind of distribute the workload. And so even though this is showing a tower ping to the west, that's probably not where Jay or where Adnan's cell phone would be. And what could account for that is this kind of distribution of workforce among the cell phone towers.
Now, there's another thing it could be. So everybody looks at this and they assume, like, this is a weird one. It's way off to the west. Who knows? Another thing that Jay and Adnan were known to do is buy pot. So it's also possible that they're off getting pot. So this could be the cell phone sort of pinging a place that they didn't really go, or it could be that they're buying pot. And that could be true regardless of what happens later in the day.
And that's a good point. They could be buying pot or doing whatever they do together, because we do know that Adnan is with Jay at this time. So it's not just Jay with Adnan's phone and car. So if they're together, they may be doing something like that. At 12:41, Jay calls Jennifer. This call lasts 1 minute and 29 seconds. And after a 24-second incoming call at 12:43, the phone goes completely silent for about 2 hours. Now, note that this is actually consistent with Jay's testimony at trial that he turned off the phone for a while. That would account for no pings, because you don't have cell phone pings for incoming calls or outgoing calls if your phone is completely off. Both of these pings from 12:41 and 12:43 are east of Woodlawn in an area that didn't really make sense given Jay's first statements. But in later testimony, Jay will say that he sold drugs from his grandmother's house and wanted to keep her out of the case as much as possible. And Jay's grandmother's house is covered by this tower that's east of Woodlawn. So his second statement would be consistent with these pings. And by the way, if his second statement is true, and we've talked about how Jay lies, and we don't know exactly which are lies and which are true, that's an example of a lie that's not meant to cover like the main crime or a big crime like murder. It's made for personal reasons. And in this case, what he's saying, we've heard this a lot, to protect his grandmother. Because if he's doing something illegal at her house, then it puts her at risk for being aiding and abetting, for her, house being subject to a search warrant, etc. And so if this second statement is closer to the truth, it actually is consistent with the type of lies that we see.
And one thing that you might be wondering, life was different in the 90s. You might be thinking, why are these kids driving around all the time? Well, number one, Jay has graduated from high school. So he's not in high school anymore. He's got a job. But Adnan's still in high school. But he's a senior. And I know when I was a senior in high school, I was barely ever at school. I was always gone doing something. I was always at the Wendy's or whatever, getting a Junior Baker cheeseburger. So this isn't that unusual that Adnan leaves. And remember, earlier in his relationship with Hae, at one point, he actually left to go buy a rose for her and brought it back and had that romantic moment in physics class or whatever. So this is pretty consistent with just how things were run there. And they're in the honors program. They're in the magnet program. They probably get a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah, that's a good point. And remember, he leaves around lunchtime, which that would probably be consistent. I think most seniors at my high school, at least, could go off campus for lunch, and he probably just took a little bit more liberty and didn't come back after lunch. So if he's leaving at lunch, probably a lot of people were leaving at lunch, and it wouldn't have garnered a lot of attention. But one thing to note about 1241 is that Adnan is still with Jay at this point. So remember, those cell phone pings went from the west all the way to the east. And this entire time, the two of them are still together. And they've been together now for about almost 2 hours.
So 12:55 to 2:15, Hae is in psychology class. This is her last class of the day. Adnan is also in this class, but he's not there when the class begins. He is still with Jay. As we said, I think in the first episode, Adnan will say he gets back to school and gets to class around 1:10 or so. In fact, he shows up to class about 1:30. At 1 p.m., Alonzo Sellers gets around to reporting a walkie-talkie stolen to his supervisors. It wasn't stolen that day, but more likely it was stolen all the way back in December. In one of those too strange to be true moments, he likely lost it when he went streaking and exposed himself to a police officer. At this point, the police come to interview Sellers at Coppin State. He's saying that he's lost it or it's been stolen. He's obviously not saying it probably got seized by the cops when I left all my clothes behind. And this walkie-talkie is over $1,000, so he kind of had to admit it. But Alonzo Sellers going through some stuff on this day. You know, he's talking to the cops about where his walkie-talkie ended up. At around the same time, at 1 p.m., Jay drops Adnan off at school. He then heads to Jennifer Pusateri's house. Now, there's an interesting question that arises here that probably only really matters if you are deep, deep, deep in the weeds in this case. Going to throw it out there and probably not talk about it again. Does Jay have Adnan's new cell phone or not? Or does Adnan have it? And if Adnan has the new cell phone, does Jay have an old one? And if Jay has the new phone, does Adnan have an old one? So we know that Adnan had a cell phone because he couldn't call girls from his house and he couldn't have girls call him. He told Sarah Koenig that one way she could know he was over Hae was that he would call girls on his cell phone all the time after he and Hae broke up in December. But the problem with this is Adnan did not get his new cell phone until January 11th, and it wasn't activated until January 12th, just a day before the murders. So could Adnan have had an old cell phone that still worked that he was using to make all these calls before? Now, this comes in, Bilal Ahmed reappears, the sort of mystery character in this case. It's hard to really understand what role, if any, he played. We know that he got Adnan hooked up with his cell phone. Adnan may have purchased a cell phone himself. He says he was working for the purposes of buying one, but it certainly was on Bilal's bill. Now, Bilal, he had a bunch of cell phones for reasons that aren't all that clear. And we know that some of Adnan's friends would get calls on occasion from a number belonging to Bilal. So could he have been using that phone? And if so, could he have had the cell phone that day, or could Jay have had it? Stephanie, for instance, would later give police a phone number for Adnan that did not match either his home phone number or his cell phone number. Remember, Stephanie's his best friend. If he was using another cell phone, she would have it. Where that number came from is completely unknown. Either way, what we can say for certain is no one disputes that at this time, Jay had both Adnan's car and a cell phone belonging to Adnan.
And Adnan having all these different cell phones at this time when he's not allowed to do a lot of the things in his life with his parents' knowledge makes sense, right? We know, because he says it himself, he buys weed and he smokes weed. So he's meeting up with people to buy weed. That might be a different phone than he's using to talk to girls. It might be a different phone than he's talking to specific girls because, you know, he does like girls. And I know that in high school, sometimes because phones were so disposable, you would just change numbers when you didn't want to talk to someone anymore. So all this is to say is that since his parents didn't know about these phones, there's really no way for us to know. And clearly he has other people paying for his phones or registering his phones for him. And it may even be a situation where he's borrowing someone's phone at times and borrowing it consistently enough that, say, Stephanie would have that number to call him, even if it wasn't a phone he carried around all the time.
And all this cell phone stuff, and whether he had an old cell phone or a new cell phone, it only really matters if you are kind of off in an ancillary thing where either you don't really believe there's a payphone at the Best Buy, we're going to get into that in a minute, or you think maybe Bilal's involved. I mean, there's sort of all sort of rabbit holes you can go down. We just want to throw it out there because it is something people talk about, and there are some weird things about this case. that aren't really clear when it comes to these phones. I mean, there's a lot of weird things about this case that aren't clear, but this is one of those that's like, it's just hard to figure out what's going on here. And with all the great cases, and I always bring up those glasses and the Manson murders. I always go back to that. Like, whose glasses were those? Nobody knows to this day, right? And maybe this is one of them. Just some weird stuff. And the Bilal angle is just a strange thing that we don't know entirely about.
But one thing to note, stepping away from how many phones he had or what we do know is that Jay has both a car and a cell phone that are Adnan's. Basically, the two most valuable things Adnan probably has. It's his key to freedom in many respects, right? Both the car and the phone. And again, we spoke about this in the last episode, but it speaks to the closeness of their relationship, despite what Adnan says about the closeness of their relationship. And it also speaks to the trust that Adnan has in Jay, or if this is not something he does all the time, leaving his phone in his car with other people, that this is kind of a standout situation where something is different this day, that he'd be willing to leave the two things that are his key to freedom and the key to his life, separate from what his parents think he's living, with somebody else.
Yeah, and the cell phone, I mean, the car, I don't know. I had a friend, I mean, he was my best friend, and he would sometimes borrow my car in high school. And number one, I hated it. I never wanted to let him borrow it, because I was like, you're going to wreck my car. But he was really aggressive in borrowing it. So he would borrow it sometimes, but only a few times. I certainly was never like, hey, man, you want to take my car to do something? But, you know, Adnan's a different dude, so maybe he was fine with that. It's a little weird to give him both your car and your cell phone. I don't know why he couldn't just tell Jay, hey, track practice is over at 4:30 or 4:45. Pick me up then. See you later. But instead, he gives him the cell phone and basically says, I will call you on this cell phone when I need you. That's the setup, and that is undisputed. Where we're at this point, undisputed that that's happening. At around 1:27, well, a little bit before 1:27, around 1, a little bit after 1, Jay drops off Adnan at the school. Adnan says he swings by the guidance counselor's office to get a letter he needs for college applications. He then goes to class, the one that he's in with Hae. He is late for it, but he gets there around 1:27.
I think that also says a lot about the comings and goings of students in this school, that he feels totally fine walking in 35 minutes after class starts. Like, that's pretty normal. If this were a stricter attendance policy, you can imagine if he's 30 minutes late, he's going to be very obvious when he walks in late. So you may as well just skip that class and go to the next class. But he kind of strolls in, not quite halfway, like a fourth of the way through class, I think speaks to the leniency they're all given, because he could probably just say, oh yeah, I was with the guidance counselor, and no one's going to really question him about it. And that's why he's able to kind of move in and out of school so fluidly.
Guys, it is time to get big mad over true crime. If you like this show and you like true crime cases, there is no one better than Heather Ashley. It's a single host podcast, so you don't have to listen to a whole lot of small talk like you do with me and Alice. All cases are done by listener request, and no case is too small. Heather gets down to the facts in a straightforward way, and she is absolutely hilarious. And I got to tell you, she has one of the best research podcasts out there.
Brett, I don't think it's an overstatement to say that Heather Ashley is one of my favorite people, not to mention favorite podcasters. And Big Mad True Crime is something you guys will absolutely love. Her storytelling is bar none. It's like you're talking with your best friend. And she says what we're all thinking, but maybe afraid to say out loud. Heather's afraid of nothing. She will say it with passion and compassion for the victims. And that's huge, Brett. I know we talk a lot about victims, but boy, does Big Mad True Crime have respect for the victims. They have huge heart and zero time for BS, which is a direct quote from one of her listeners. And we are all here for her Heatherisms and her sassy one-liners. I can repeat them all day long. And when I repeat them in my real life, people think I'm way cooler than I actually am. And the length of her podcast is perfect for a commute, although I'd listen to her talk all day long. And she has just one case per episode usually, but she's done multi-parters. So if you are tired of people doing 14-part cases like we do, you will love Big Mad True Crime's succinct way of getting through cases in an episode.
So you need to listen to Big Mad True Crime. It is available anywhere you listen to podcasts, and she is dropping new episodes every Monday. Check it out. You won't regret it.
The Prosecutors Podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Most of you listening right now are probably multitasking. Yep, while you're listening to us talk, you're probably also driving, cleaning, exercising, or maybe even grocery shopping. But if you're not in some kind of moving vehicle, there's something else you can be doing right now. Getting an auto quote from Progressive Insurance. It's easy, and you could save money by doing it right from your phone. Drivers who save by switching to Progressive save nearly $700 on average, and auto customers qualify for an average of 7 discounts. Discounts for having multiple vehicles on your policy, being a homeowner, and more.
So just like your favorite podcast, Progressive will be with you 24/7, 365 days a year, so you're protected no matter what. Multitask right now. Quote your car insurance at Progressive.com to join the over 29 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. National average 12-month saving of $698 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will vary. Discounts not available in all states and situations.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
Optimize your nutrition this year with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal service. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Choose from 40 weekly options across 8 dietary preferences, like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Eat smarter at factormeals.com/listen50 and use code LISTEN50 for 50% off, plus free shipping on your first box. Factormeals.com/listen50, code LISTEN50.
.com.
Get this, adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Wondery. greenlight.com/Wondery.
Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Check them out today. Angie.com, ANGI.com.
At 1:10 p.m., Don goes to lunch. and he gets back at 1:42. So just a little bit over 30-minute lunch. At 2:15, the bell rings, letting school out. At 2:30 p.m., according to an affidavit that she will file later, Asia McClain sees Adnan in the library just off campus, and they begin talking. And Adnan, with whom Asia was not close, tells her that he is happy that Hae is happy and has no ill will towards her. At 2:36 p.m., a 5-second phone call comes into the cell phone. Now, Serial spends a lot of time on this 2:36 p.m. call because, as the prosecution theorized it, it was the call for Jay to come get Adnan after he had murdered Hae. But whatever the truth in this case, this call almost certainly was not that call because of more in the timeline that we'll talk about soon. At the time of the 2:36 call, the cell phone is pinging the Woodlawn Tower. The Woodlawn Tower covers most of the areas that we're interested in, and that would be Woodlawn High School, the Best Buy, the mall, Jen Pusateri's house, and the tower's 360 degrees of coverage are broken into 120-degree wedges, what we're talking about, the trifecta, A, B, and C sectors. Now, this call is in the B wedge of the Woodlawn Tower. It does not cover Woodlawn High School. Woodlawn High School falls within the A wedge of this 360-degree coverage. Jen's house, however, is in the B wedge. The C wedge covers the area to the west of the school, which covers Adnan's house, the Security Square Mall, and the Best Buy. So, when this call was made, Jay was probably at Jen's house when he gets the call. Obviously, we can't say for sure where the person who made the call was located because all we have is the cell phone records of the phone that Jay had when he picked it up.
And this 2:36 call is one of those red herrings that you see every now and then. The prosecution, for reasons that aren't entirely clear, in either their opening or their closing, I forget which one, points to this as the call that they think was the, hey, come pick me up. I've murdered Hae. I need you to pick me up. And Adnan will say that like his whole case rises and falls on that call. And whether or not he and Hae could have gotten from the school to the parking lot where he then strangled Hae in the time before he would then make this call. Remember, the whole theory here about what Adnan is doing, the reason he's given Jay his cell phone in his car is because he needs an excuse to get into Hae's car. He can't get into her car if his car is sitting on campus. He needs to be able to say, hey, my car broke down. I need you to give me a ride. I mean, that's the whole reason he can't have his car. So he's doing that. If you believe Jay, he's doing that so he can get in Hae's car, murder her at some point, and then call him. The 2:36 call makes this a very tight timeline. And you see the prosecution talk about this in their opening and their closing. What's interesting about it, though, if you read the trial transcript, there's no evidence ever put on that this is the call. Like, Jay doesn't say it's this call. Like, nobody ever says it's this call. It's a little unclear why the prosecution does that. And it's one of those things where, as we've said a lot of times, what the prosecution says isn't evidence. So the prosecution's putting forward a theory that they've decided on. But it doesn't seem like it's this call. And in Serial, they did this whole drive test. And frankly, I thought it was weird because they do this drive test, they barely make it. And then they're like, oh, you could do it. I don't think you could do it. I think if based on their drive test, just because you can get from the school to the Best Buy parking lot in that period of time doesn't mean you could also murder someone, get to the phone, and then call Jay. Like, you got to factor that in, and they don't do that. So I don't think it's possible for this to be the call. I think if Adnan's innocent, this is not the call to, I killed somebody. And if he's guilty, this isn't that call either. It would have been a different call. It would have been I'm going to get in her car soon. Be ready. It would be something like that. Checking to make sure the cell phone's on. Something like that. But it wouldn't be the call. The call, if there is one, would have to come later. So according to Asia, and another thing that's interesting about that is we talk about Asia McClain. She's obviously really important. She comes up a lot. We're going to talk about her later. She comes up in a lot of the post-conviction stuff. If this call is the call, if the prosecution's right, then if Asia is telling the truth, it could not be Adnan. Adnan is innocent. If Asia is telling the truth, Adnan is innocent if this is the call. So that's why it's so important, because you have this possible alibi. A lot of people doubt Asia for a lot of different reasons, but if she's telling the truth, then if Hae's dead by this point, Adnan is not the one who killed her. I guess is the long and the short of it. So at 2:40, Asia and her boyfriend leave the library, and Asia says that Adnan is still there at that point. At 2:45, something else happens. It's one of those, did this happen or not? In one statement to the police, Debbie Warren, who is another person at the school who's friends with Adnan and Hae, says that she saw Adnan at the guidance counselor's office. In the first trial, she confirms that she told police that. In the second trial, she can't remember whether she told police that or not. The defense attorney will end up confronting her with her prior statement that she, in fact, had told police that. She says she doesn't remember or isn't sure whether she said he was there or not. Now, one thing to note here, Debbie doesn't testify in either trial that she remembers seeing Adnan at the guidance counselor's office at 2:45. All she does in the first trial is she confirms that she remembers telling the officers that she saw him. And this is a subtle but important point for a couple reasons. In both trials, it's the prior statement that's important, even though she doesn't remember making it by the second trial. It's also important to note, if Debbie is right, then Asia McClain is likely wrong. These stories can be reconciled, though, if Debbie saw Adnan at the guidance counselor's office earlier in the day. Recall, Adnan says that he actually was at the guidance counselor's office earlier in the day, and for Adnan's part, he's never said he was at the guidance counselor's office at 2:45, a quirk of trial for evidence nerds out there. The reason that in the first trial, this is basically one question. The defense attorney, its own cross-examination, she asked, did you tell the police that you saw Adnan at the guidance counselor's office at 2:45? She says yes. Well, that's it. That's basically the end of that, because Debbie's prior statement to the police is hearsay, so you can't really get into it. It works out for her better in the second trial because she no longer remembers telling police that, which means in the second trial, there's this whole long extended questioning about this. And they really get into, well, didn't you tell him this? And didn't you tell him this? And let me read you the statement where you said you saw him there. And so it actually works out a little bit better for Adnan in the second trial. I only bring this up because I have heard people act like this was a big deal. Like, I've actually heard someone say that Adnan, his first trial ends in a mistrial for funny reasons that we'll get into later. But I've heard people say that, oh man, if it only gone to verdict that first trial, Adnan would have won because Debbie Warren remembered he was there at 2:45. Number one, that's not what she said. Number two, it was literally one throwaway question. And number three, in the second trial, they got to go into it a lot more. So it worked out a lot better for him when Debbie didn't remember than in the first trial when he did.
And note this, Adnan's own words is he was at the guidance counselor at 12:45, and Debbie remembers seeing him at 2:45. That's a 2-hour difference. And so even if she told officers this, 2 hours, especially when it's after lunch, I don't know about you guys, maybe my life just like revolves around food, but when it's at school, I basically remember if something happened before lunch or after lunch. So the difference of 2 hours is not that big of a deal to Debbie, right? She doesn't know the whole timeline. She doesn't know what else police know about the investigation. She doesn't know what Asia McClain has said. She doesn't know what Adnan has said. So if she saw Adnan in the guidance counselor's office at 12:45, you can see how that could easily be mistaken for 2:45 in her mind. But it makes a world of difference, obviously, in this timeline. And the biggest thing that we know, of course, is that both Asia's story and Debbie's story, and they're not stories, they're their memories or mismemories, really, are incompatible. They can't both be true of that day. But you're beginning to see how maybe Debbie may have misremembered here. And because of all that questioning we got in the second trial, it seems much more likely that she is misremembering the time. 2:45 is still after lunch, so that would be consistent with seeing him sometime in the afternoon at the guidance counselors.
Yeah, and it's one of those funny things in this case. Depending on what you believe happened, like what side you're on, sometimes what people say about time, that is the God's gospel truth, and you can't question it. If she said she saw him at 2:45, by God, he was there at 2:45. And the other times, like, well, I don't know, it could be anything, right? And the reality is what Alice is saying. Times are so hard to remember. It's so hard to remember exactly where you were when you saw something. You remember something vaguely and you juxtapose it with other things. I think Debbie probably did say Adnan at the guidance counselor's office when Adnan says he was there, which was more like, only about an hour and 30 minutes before this is probably what happened. And once again, there's some tension here about Adnan's alibi. Is he at the guidance counselor's office or is he with Asia? It's a little unclear. I mean, the way both of them can be telling the truth is if Debbie just saw him earlier. Okay, the next call. Oh, go ahead, Alice. The next call is a big one. The next call is probably the most important call in the entire case. 3:15. Adnan's cell phone receives a 20-second call. If Jay is telling the truth, and if Adnan killed Hae, this is likely the call that Hae is dead and Jay needs to come meet Adnan. What exactly happens around this is confusing, and it's confusing because you hear so many different things from Jay, and you hear so many different things from Jennifer and everybody else that Jay's told about this. So Jay will tell the police that he meets Adnan in the first story at a location, I forget, it's like off of road, Edmondson Avenue or something, I can't remember what the road is, where he sees Hae's body in the trunk of her car. He will then change this location later to the Best Buy parking lot, is where he saw the body. He will tell another friend that he actually saw the body in a gas station parking lot, and he will tell another friend that Adnan killed Hae in the library parking lot, and then maybe he saw her body there. It's a little unclear. Either way, he says, hey, Adnan gave me the call, come pick him up. He comes, picks him up. Adnan shows him the body. Don't worry, we're going to go into all this in more detail later on. And they then drive to a park. They call somebody to pick up some weed. They drop Hae's car with her body in the trunk off at a parking ride. They smoke marijuana. They wax poetic about life and where to leave the body and all this other stuff. At some point, Adnan says, hey, I got to get back to school because I need to be seen at track practice. Jay takes Adnan back to school. He said he doesn't really recall the exact time, but the sun's going down around now, and he speculates it was maybe around 4:30. It might have been later than that. Sunset on that day was 5:08. And this is one of those things that some people really focus on this. Well, Jay said the sun was setting, so it had to be, that would mean 5:08. And it can't have been 5:08 because Adnan certainly was at track practice before that. So how do you reconcile these? And the way you reconcile them is the common sense thing that sunset doesn't mean the scientific sunset. And I actually have spent a few days every day noting when sunset is and looking outside both before that and after it. And as most of you know, when the sun starts to set is like 30 minutes to an hour before sunset. And then after sunset, it's actually still light outside for another 15 to 30 minutes. So the sun was setting is not that helpful, frankly, in determining exactly when Jay is talking about. Now, we know that Adnan says he was at track practice. We know that Jay says he needed to get back to track practice to be seen by people. And track practice started more like around 4 o'clock. So the most likely explanation, if Jay is telling the truth, is the sun is setting. It is getting dark, but it is not set yet. And in January on the East Coast, that's a pretty good description of 4 o'clock, which is when Jay supposedly would have needed to drop Adnan off to be at track practice. Track practice is one of those things people talk about a lot. I don't really know why, because I think Adnan was absolutely at track practice that day. He was there if he didn't kill Hae. He was there if he did kill Hae. Because if he didn't kill Hae, that's just where he was. And if he did kill Hae, the whole point was to get back for track practice so people would see him, so that would be part of his alibi.
And backing up real quick, the fact that 3:15 is most likely the call where, the call from Adnan to Jay that Hae is dead is much more likely than the 2:36 call that the prosecution focused on, because at 2:15, Hae was still alive. She had just gotten out of school. And so that would have been, 20 minutes for her to meet up with Adnan, be comfortable enough with him that they had probably had some type of conversation before he then killed her, and he would have called Jay. Whereas 3:15 gave him a whole hour to do all that. And it's just more likely for that to have happened. Wherever, if Adnan killed Hae, wherever he killed her, that would just be more likely. So I agree with you. I don't know why people have focused more on the 2:36 call. It's the 3:15 call, I think, that is much, much more interesting.
And in fairness, the reason they focused on it was because the prosecution stupidly picked it. I mean, this was a mistake, a plain mistake by the prosecution. And I'll go back to Michael Peterson. If you think Michael Peterson was guilty, I mean, it didn't end up mattering, but it was dumb of the prosecution to put so much weight on that blowpoke, because that was a guess on their part. It was a good guess, but it was a guess. And they put all this weight on it. And then the blowpoke shows up in the middle and they're like, well, shoot, we're going to lose now. No, they didn't lose because the jury was still like, we still think he did it because they didn't hear the owl theory. But nevertheless, it was a mistake for the prosecution to do that. And in this case, it was a mistake for the prosecution to point to this time. And if Adnan is guilty, then he knows 100%. He didn't kill Hae at that time. So he's going to be all in on that time. He's perfectly fine focusing intently on that time. Granted, if he's innocent, same thing. I mean, there's a lot of, in this case, if he's guilty, he's going to do the same thing that he would do if he's innocent. And that's what's always hard about these cases, is figuring out, like, what is more consistent with guilt or innocence. But certainly, if he's guilty, that was a godsend. And it's a godsend that a guilty Adnan has used for the last 20 years to point to, I could not have done this. I could not have done this. Look at Asia. Listen to Asia and what she says. You know, listen to people who saw me. I couldn't have done it. Look at the time. There's no way you could have gotten there. And honestly, he's right. Guilty or innocent, he's right. I'm sorry. I don't care what you think about this case. If you think Adnan's guilty, he did not kill her before that call. And if you think the only way he did this was if that call was the pickup call, then he didn't do it. He's innocent. That's my position on this. That first call was not the call. If he did it, this is the call.
Right. So let's talk more about the 315 call. The 315 call pings Woodlawn Tower, Sector C. Remember, this is the tower to the west of Jen's house and covers the Best Buy and the mall. At 3:20, Hae is supposed to pick up her cousin, but she never does. Her cousin attended Camp Field Elementary School, and it's about 4 miles and 11 minutes from Woodlawn High School. I think it's pretty clear something has happened to Hae at this point. She's likely dead, but she's certainly not free to go wherever she is at 3:20, because we have heard repeatedly she is very responsible. This is a very young cousin. I believe she's in kindergarten. So she is not at an age where she should be left alone or can get home without Hae's help. And Hae is always there to pick her up on time. So it is a huge red flag that Hae does not show up. And if you're looking at that 315 call, that everything's completed, it would fall in line with 3:20. Hae is not showing up when she has always shown up before. At 3:21, the cell phone calls Jennifer Pusateri. Now, this call is a little confusing. In some of the timelines, Jay would have been at Jennifer's house at the time. But if that's true, why would he call himself? It's possible this is evidence that Adnan actually had the phone and Jay had an old phone of Bilal's. It's also possible that this is actually Jay calling Jen to see if Adnan has called there. Remember, if Adnan has Jay going to meet him somewhere but doesn't have a phone, it's possible that Jay's having trouble finding Adnan and can't call him. Remember, we talked about how it might make sense for Jay to have his car, but why does he also need his phone? Because now Adnan may not have a phone on him to be able to direct Jay to where he is, so one person having a phone isn't going to be very helpful. So a theory is that Jay called Jen to see if Adnan had given any update on where exactly he is for him to go pick him up. This theory is supported by the tower data, because this call, like the incoming call from earlier, pings Woodlawn Tower C, which once again covers the Best Buy location. For his part, Jay will testify this was him calling Jen because he wanted to pick up some weed after they dropped off Hae's car. And if that is his testimony, and what we just talked about, the theory of him calling Jen to see if Adnan's called Jen, would ring somewhat true, because remember, the best lies have some element of truth in them.
And let me just say this. One thing about this call, Jen doesn't remember this. Like, that one of the problems, it's like there are people who should be able to answer these questions and they just can't. So this is a weird one, because we know, I mean, there's really just no question that Jay has a cell phone at this point. I think everybody agrees on that. Adnan agrees on that. Jay agrees on it. So why would he be calling Jen? In his second statement, he's at Jen's playing video games by this point. I think in his first statement, he's at Jen's playing video games. So he's not going to call her house while he's sitting in her house. So the call, he has to have left Jen's by now. The car is near the Best Buy, or the phone is by the Best Buy, and presumably so is the car. And it's like, if Jen could just say, oh, yeah, that was Jay calling me. Or, oh, that was somebody else. But it's just really hard to figure out what's going on with this. And this is one of those, man, if we just knew more about this call, it would probably clarify a lot of things. But that's a fallibility of human remembering. And I will say this about this call. The other thing about this call is it's just a foreshadow. If you think there's some sort of really complex police conspiracy here, they dropped the ball on this one, because they really should have come up with a reason for this call that was better than what Jay gives them. I mean, this should have been a call that they could have used to really nail home the fact that Adnan had killed Hae by now, and this is some sort of call. But they don't do that, and this is sort of a mystery, We're speculating about what the call is. Honestly, I think Jay's speculating about what the call is. One other thing I want to say about cell phones before we keep going. We mentioned there's controversy about the cell phones, and there's controversy about how you use the data for location purposes. I want to note that's incoming calls. So there is controversy about incoming calls to the cell phone. There's not controversy about outgoing calls. Everybody agrees that outgoing calls are pretty much accurate. They can bounce off different towers depending on sort of busyness on the tower. I mean, that can happen. But generally speaking, outgoing calls, there's really no controversy about those. It's incoming calls where you get a lot of controversy and you get a lot of people who are wondering, like, are the incoming calls accurate? We're going to spend a lot of time on that later on. But just as you're hearing this, know the outgoing calls, such as this one, we're all pretty sure about. So this is an outgoing call. It puts the cell phone near the Best Buy. Pretty clear it was near the Best Buy. Why the call happened? Harder to say.
And one thing to note about Jen's inability to remember this, or Jay's inability to remember what this call was about, is by their own words, there's been a lot of weed throughout this day, right? Whether this part is true or not, Jay is saying that he's calling Jen because he wanted to pick up some weed. Adnan and Jay were riding around together earlier. They said that they were potentially either buying weed or smoking weed, right? So there's also some substances at play here, which can mess with your ability to assess what real time is or your ability to remember certain things. So whether they were doing that or not, it's certainly like a background in all of their stories, which probably means there was at least some weed present and probably some weed usage this day. So could the 3:15 call have been the one telling Jay to pick up Adnan, and this 3:21 call have happened after Hae's car was dropped off at the park and ride? So we've only got 6 minutes to work with. At trial, Jay says that he was in the car when he got the 3:15 call. He was going to turn left, but instead he turned right to the security mall. We know from the cell phone ping that when this call came in, he was in the section of the cell tower covering security mall, so he would have been relatively close. But it's only 3 miles from security mall to the park and ride, so it really doesn't feel like Jay could have gotten the call, picked up Adnan, followed him to the park and ride, and then called Jen for the pot hookup number in just 6 minutes. And in fact, the call to Jay's pot hookup doesn't happen until 3:48. The most likely explanation is that Jay doesn't really remember why he called Jen, and he's just filling in the gaps with a guess. And that's why he probably doesn't even know either.
And look, if you think Jay's telling the truth about the key parts of this story, he's definitely lying about some things, and he's definitely guessing on other things. And that's not that rare, honestly. I mean, when you're asking someone, people, and Alice and I have run into this, and it's like sometimes you just want to tell people, don't guess. In fact, we do tell people that. We tell people when we sit down in an interview with a witness, we say, if you don't know, say you don't know. If you're guessing, tell us you're guessing. Like if you're speculating based on other things you know, and this is sort of an educated guess, let us know that you're making an educated guess and it's not, you definitely remember this, because people will do it all the time.
And the thing with that is, even though we give them that instruction, the number of times people say what they're guessing as fact is like nearly 100% of the time. I mean, whether they are a friendly witness or an adversarial witness, all the time we'll hear like, yeah, I was at work that day. Like, are you sure about that? Yeah. How do you know you were at work that day? Because I was always at work. So do you remember you were at work on that Tuesday? No. Then how do you know? Because I was always at work. So it's an educated guess that you're at work, but you don't actually remember looking at the time and the calendar and saying, today is May 1st. It's a Tuesday and I'm at work. Is that correct? Yeah, you're right. And you know, we go through this all the time. So even if it doesn't come out in the testimony that it's a guess, it's because you often have to ask those 10 follow-up questions to get at the point that mostly it's a guess. And guess what? This is what our brains do. It's not that people are trying to trick anybody. If you know how vision works in this way. Your brain is like the master artist. What you see in front of you when you look around, just look around the room right now. You're not really seeing all of that. There are massive gaps in what you are seeing. Your eyes only pick up so many things because there are parts of your peripheral vision that are impossible biologically for your eyes to capture, for the way the light hits for you to actually complete a picture. So if you saw what your eyes actually saw and not your brain, it would be like stripes of things, and there would be large swaths of black space. And what your brain does to keep you like functioning in this world is to take an educated guess and fill in all of your peripheral vision so that when you look around, you see a full picture. That's also what your brain does when trying to remember anything as a memory. It fills in blanks to make sense of the world. And that's why when we speak inaccurately, only lawyers speak like this, by the way. All of us speak in this manner where we make educated guesses all the time, but we present them as fact because our brain tells us it's fact. But in reality, it's just an educated guess. And I think this is a really important point because it only matters when the timeline and evidence matters in terms of trying to figure out what happened leading up to or right after a crime.
And I think that great poet of our time, Ben Gibbard, Death Cab for Cutie, summarized what Alice has said when he noted that when I see you, I really see you upside down, but my brain knows better, and it picks you up and turns you around. And that's essentially what Alice is saying. You are filling in the gaps to make the world around you make sense. And the other thing that's happening here, so Jay, we're going to get into this later, but Jay comes in and he tells his story to the police after Jen has told the story to the police. And he tells a story that's has some things that remain constant throughout, but is also filled with a lot of lies and half-truths and fabrications. And he's doing that for various reasons. Maybe because he killed Hae, or maybe because he's trying to protect his grandmother and various other things. By the second interview, the police now have these cell phone pings, and they have the cell phone data, and they have some rough idea of what the cell phone is telling them. And they're asking him like, well, what about this call? What happened here, dude? Like, you told us this whole story. You didn't mention this. And so then Jay is trying to remember the purpose of that call. And I think you see that here. I mean, this is an example of Jay, like, doing the very best he can. I mean, charitably, if you think he's telling the truth, to sort of fill in these gaps. If you think he's just lying, whatever. But if he's telling the truth, he's doing the best he can. And I will just tell you, whether Jay's lying or not, this happens all the time. I mean, Alice and I have seen it. We've interviewed, at this point, Alice, so many people, and people who were guilty and people who were innocent. People who were lifelong criminals, people who've never committed a crime in their life. And the one constant is you have to be vigilant with them while they're telling you a story, because whether they mean to or not, they are going to tell you things that aren't true and things that are not consistent with the things that you know for sure happened. And you're definitely seeing that in this story. So now it's 3:30. As we said before, Hae is supposed to pick up her cousin. And the thing about Hae, she is reliable. And she picks up her cousin when she's supposed to pick up her cousin. She didn't do it this day. And that means there's a problem. And this is one of those things that irritates me about the police's investigation to this case that we're going to talk about more later. When you have somebody who is reliable and they are doing the same thing every day and they don't do it, your assumption should not be, maybe they ran off to California. No, something is wrong. And her cousin's school, they know something's wrong because her cousin is still there. So they call the family, hey, Hae never showed up and her cousin's still here. We don't know what's going on. And I will tell you this, whatever happened to Hae, it's happened by now. Didn't happen after this. It has happened by now. She's been grabbed, she's been kidnapped, she's been murdered, whatever it is, it's happened because Hae would have picked up her cousin that day and she didn't. So we know for a fact that on this day, by 3:30, the event has transpired. Okay, we're going to leave you there for now today. Like I said, we are trying to keep this. It may end up being 20 episodes, but we're going to try and keep it less time-wise. So we're going to do another episode tomorrow to finish this day, this critical day, and get you guys at least through this. Because I know it can be hard to remember stuff over a week. So we're trying to be better, guys. We're trying to be better. But this has been a big day so far. You can already see it. It's a controversial day, and I'm sure you guys have thoughts. I want to hear from you. If you think we got things wrong, if we're messing up times, if we pinged the wrong tower, whatever it is you think happened, let us know. You may be right. We may be right. Who knows? Let's figure it out together. This is going to be going on for a while, and I'm sure there's going to be some follow-up. So we will definitely address any concerns you have at some point. Shoot us an email at prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all your social media. Thank you so much to those of you on Patreon. Many of you who are watching this right now, for your support of this show and of Alice and me. It means so much. Thank you to all of you on the gallery who say wonderful things about Alice, how smart she is and how beautiful she is and how articulate she is. Nobody ever says nice things about me, but that's fine. I'm cool with it. You know, I'm surviving.
It's because, Brett, clearly everyone is completely in love with you. And if you don't hear it enough, then get a life.
Oh, that was not where I thought you were going.
I thought... Look, when it gets past 10 p.m., we start getting a little loopy.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Alice and I are going to be back in like 5 minutes to record the second episode in this. Alice, is there anything else you wanted to add? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off as you were insulting me.
No, I just really wanted to insult you, so I got my dig in.
There you go. Well, I'll tell you what. At the end of the next episode, if Alice and I are still conscious and her baby isn't screaming, we will answer a question, because we should answer some questions, and we haven't done that lately. We'll do that. But for now, we're going to sign off. We will see you guys tomorrow. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors.
Prosecrafting. Mm-hmm. It's going to be so many spin-offs of the group. Well, it says you're in the show. Everyone can see us.
No, they can't.
Oh, okay. Mine says everyone can see and hear you.
Well, I mean, we're not live, so if they can,
I'm just kidding.
Then so be it. Did you have something else you wanted to say before I went
I have
live?
nothing to say. I have nothing to say. I remember you do that. That's a very cute summer tradition. I have, do you have a stack of books? Oh, I am not as prolific of a reader as you, and so the books stack up faster on my bedside table than I'm able to read them, and it gets to like a breaking point of about 19 books before I reshelve them. I'm like, yeah. Exactly.
If you're a parent or share a fridge with someone, Instacart is about to make grocery shopping so much easier. Because with family carts, you can share a cart with your partner and each add the items you want. Since between the two of you, odds are you'll both remember everything you need. And this way, you'll never have to eat milkless cereal again. So minimize the stress of the weekly shop with family carts. Download the Instacart app and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Service fees apply. For 3 orders in 14 days, excludes restaurants.
If you were fixing your bra straps, fussing with wires, or battling your bra during this podcast, stop right now. You'll want to hear this. Those bra problems, those problems you thought you had to live with, Third Love has solved them. Their bras make it easy to get what you want, whether it's ultimate cleavage, a smooth look, or stopping your shirt buttons from pulling. With over 60 sizes, including half cups you won't find anywhere else, you'll never be stuck between two sizes that don't fit. So stop settling for bad bras. Now's the time to treat yourself and get your problem solved. Save $15 on your first order with code PODCAST15 at thirdlove.com.
It's a streaming hot summer on PlutoTV featuring hit blockbusters during popcorn summer movies. Watch Mark Wahlberg try and solve a murder in Four Brothers, or go on an adventure with an Indiana Jones movie marathon. Plus, PlutoTV has hundreds of channels with thousands more movies available live and on demand. Download PlutoTV on all your favorite devices for free. PlutoTV. Stream now, pay never.